Always a pleasure when I can be joined by Michael Lombardi. And Michael, being in the Boston area this week, a place you're obviously incredibly familiar with, I mean, you might as well call this Tom Brady week. There is no other name being spoken, and obviously a highly anticipated regular season matchup when you look at the league overall. I wonder, are we ever going to get the closure that so many people around the Boston area want when it comes to Tom Brady's departure and his relationship with Bill Belichick?
I don't know. I mean, no matter what Tom says or what Bill says, nobody seems to believe it. It's a little bit of everybody has their own opinion on what happened and why it happened. I think, frankly, Tom wanted to do exactly what he's doing now. It was important for him to build his brand. It was important for him to get more exposure. It was important for him to do the things that he wanted to do later in life, and he knew he couldn't do it within the culture of New England. So he did the gentleman thing and he left to go do all the things he wanted to do somewhere else that he knew he couldn't do in New England, that the very culture he built, he couldn't violate. And so I think it's really comes to that. I don't think it's any more than that. And I think after 20 years together or 18 years together, however long it was, and all the success they've had, they both probably, at least Tom, had the right to do whatever he wanted to do.
Certainly well within his right to make those professional decisions. But so you're of the thinking that it didn't have as much to do with the pieces that were put around him or the contracts that he did with New England. There seems to be two different lines of thinking. There's the one side that says, no, they did bring in Antonio Brown. No, they did try to draft so-and-so. No, they did try to pay him X number of years ago. And then the other side that says, well, New England wasn't going to give him the tools that he needed to win another Super Bowl. But are you more of the thinking then that it had more to do with the culture off the field and his aspirations for his life after football?
I really think it's the evidence is overwhelming. I mean, how many commercials? He's even doing a Subway commercial and he doesn't even eat Subway. I mean, so I think it's pretty clear that he has a brand that he needed to really generate, that Peyton Manning was able to generate while he was in Indianapolis and then when he went to Denver, that the culture within New England wasn't for that. And I think that he wanted to do it, but he couldn't do it. And so he left. I think this is really, how much more success could one organization have? I mean, the pieces, he had plenty of pieces. They won Super Bowls together. He just went to a team that was really talented and his skill set fit in perfectly. And he also brought with him part of the New England culture to Tampa Bay. They're running New England plays. They're behaving like the Patriots. They're talking like the Patriots. So I think it was ultimately his decision to embrace his after career while he still had a career.
I'm glad you pointed to this Subway commercial because I can't be the only one that sees the hypocrisy in all of this, where he has built a multi-million-dollar brand around holistic health and medicine, and he's taking what must be an enormous paycheck to do an advertisement around a sandwich that he wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. I don't understand why he needs to continue to build a brand that is already so well established.
Well, I think he's making up for lost time. He hasn't really done that when he was in New England. He did some stuff, but I think the tenor and the tone was much different. So I think he's making up for lost time. And I certainly don't know, whether he eats Subway or not. I just know that it seems a little strange that, someone who likes avocado ice cream would endorse a Subway commercial.
One of the things that was interesting to me, and, you take it with a grain of salt, I guess, but when Alex Guerrero kind of stepped out of his lane and said, oh, well, the reason Tom Brady left was because Bill Belichick couldn't seem to figure out that he had matured beyond that 20-year quarterback or that young quarterback that he drafted all those years ago. You know Bill Belichick so well. Do you think that there's merit to that he somehow wasn't able to process his quarterback's maturity?
I think what Alex said, and I've said it on Nesson and I've said it on my podcast, The GM Shuffle, I think it's completely wrong. I think he's misguided. I don't know where he's coming from with this information. He was never a part of our meetings. And frankly, we brought people in to help Tom to be able to bridge the gap, the millennial gap, that Tom could almost be the father for a lot of these young kids we were drafting. So we wanted to understand how that was the best we could relate to that. And I think that we put time and effort into that. We put time and effort into trying to help bridge that gap. So I don't know where Alec comes up with what he's talking about. I know that he was welcome to treat players. He was part of the process. He did a tremendous job. It wasn't always what the medical staff wanted to do, but yet they allowed him to do it because they had such faith and confidence within him. So this is kind of surprising that he would make this turn as he talks about something that I don't think he really has any expertise in.
As it relates to Tom Brady's return to Foxborough, it was interesting seeing some promotional stuff rolled out around, I know how these guys prepare. I know exactly what their week looks like. I know what that's going to feel like. I know what Sunday Night Football feels like. I mean, it seems like all those sort of mental mantras of visual preparation is what Brady is willing to offer in the run up to this game, that he knows how this is going to feel. But is it really possible to fully grasp what it's going to be like going back to a place with so many memories and having to get ready in the visitors' locker room?
You know, he did a lot of work in that visitor locker room. He used to get stretched and worked out there quite a bit. So I think he is familiar with that room, maybe not on game day particularly. But look, he understands what Belichick's modus operandi is in terms of preparing the defense. He knows that the Patriots defense will try to take away his 1 and 2 top targets, whether it's Antonio Brown, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and he will run the risk of asking them to run the football. So Tom knows what kind of game plan he's going to walk into. He knows how they're prepared, and he knows how in tune the Patriot players are going to be, because they don't want to get embarrassed on a Sunday night game in front of a national audience that'll be probably the highest rated football game since the Super Bowl. We all know this. So I think it does help him that he's comfortable and familiar. And look, let's face it, he's won 6 Super Bowls. I mean, he's not going to get booed when he comes back in the stadium. He's going to get embraced, and he should.
As it relates to the game itself, a lot of people saw him coming off a first loss of the season for Tampa, and said, this is going to be a lock. He's going to come home. Mac Jones has been struggling. This is going to be an easy win. But you look at Tampa's defense and some of the vulnerability that you've seen in the secondary. Is this matchup not quite as clear cut as some may think?
Well, I mean, look, the Patriots have had trouble scoring points. That's not a secret after 3 weeks. And they've had trouble throwing the football after 3 weeks. They really haven't been able to get their passing game really in a rhythm. They've got a lot of moving parts. And so on paper, this does look like it should be an easy 10-point win for the Bucs coming into a place that has lost 2 home games already. I mean, the Patriots typically are good at home, and they've lost 2 home games already. So, my sense of this is on paper it looks one way. When you start playing the game, it could go another way, and momentum's going to be really the deciding factor. The Patriots players will be ready to play, but I think the Bucs are the far superior team right now, early in the season.
Just one other thing on Mac Jones. Greg Bedard did kind of have this interesting observation where, after their loss to the Saints, Bill Belichick kind of came over on the field and grabbed him by the wrist and led him away from the field right before he was set to engage with some Saints players. It was interesting. I'm curious how you read that, knowing him the way that you do, or if you have any insight into their relationship so far. I mean, he certainly seems to be a mentor. This is a young, impressionable quarterback that I wasn't aware, but was reading after the fact that Mac Jones used to have the nickname McEnroe because he has a bit of a temper, and he was really beating himself up after such a poor offensive performance. But are you reading too much into that to kind of look at that and go, what was that about?
Well, I think these 2 teams are in different places. This is a young Patriot team. This is a team that has to learn all the Patriot ways all over again, and Mac being the leader in the clubhouse in that area. And so I think Coach Belichick was trying to remind him about this is going to be a process, that we can't get too hard on ourselves. There's a lot of new faces on offense. There's not a new faces on defense. We didn't have a full 4-game preseason. We couldn't really practice in a lot of pads. I mean, I think this is going to be a team that gets better as the year goes on. I think Mac will get better as the year goes on. But I think you have to have a sense of understanding where your team is right now. And I think that was the conversation that Belichick. There are going to be tough days for Mac Jones. It's not going to be a Hollywood script where it's going to come out perfectly. And Dennis Allen's defense was very good last week against them. They took away the run. They made it one-dimensional for him, and it became a problem. And I think Coach Belichick knows these growing pains are something that are going to be a part of Mac Jones's early career that he will grow from down the road.
It's interesting because the way my mind just kind of read that was, I bet this kid is gonna be grabbed by the wrist and brought downstairs and chewed out. But maybe not. I mean, for young players, this is Bill Belichick has it in him to use the softer touch and have this be a teachable moment. I mean, is there a lot of leash there?
I think there has to be, because you started a young quarterback, and he's got to understand that the NFL's hard. Look at all the rookie quarterbacks that are struggling. I mean, Justin Fields could barely get a throw off last week. They had 6 first downs, 2 of them by penalties. Trevor Lawrence is struggling. I mean, Coach Belichick realized, I think, early this summer that if he went with Mac, there was going to be some ebb and flow, some up and downs, because it's a hard job to learn on the job training. You don't have that free year to learn from, like Tom Brady had. Tom Brady had a lot of time to learn the craft before he went in and played. This is on the job. This is going to cost us games. And I think he's got to really get Mac to the point where he doesn't put too much pressure on himself and plays the game naturally, not systematically.
Is there any other game that we should be paying attention to that you're interested in week 4, aside from this one? Or do you think that this really does have a Super Bowl hype around it, that this is just going to dominate the entire week into the weekend?
Well, I think there's a ton of games. I mean, the Monday night game, the Chargers and the Raiders, 2 really good teams from the West. The Chiefs coming back to Philadelphia after a 2-game loss. Andy Reid's returning to Philadelphia, and we're not even talking about that, So I think that's the game. Cleveland, Minnesota. Kevin Stefanski returns to Minnesota, where he was an assistant coach, and we get to see Baker Mayfield's offense, which is similar to Minnesota, and the way Kirk Cousins is playing. I mean, that's a really good game. And then, of course, the NFC West, we've got those 2 teams competing. Arizona goes to San Francisco. Arizona goes to the Rams, and Seattle goes to San Francisco. Those are 2 great games that we're going to be able to take in. So this is a tremendous slate. And I didn't even mention Baltimore-Denver. That's another great game we have on tap. So this is a really good week 4 of the season.
How scary was that for you to see what Andy Reid went through?
Well, I think it is scary. When you certainly get dehydrated and it's a hot day and you've got that heavy jacket on and there's a lot of pressure coming at you and you're trying to make decisions and it's a challenge. And when you don't drink some water and you don't understand that you're vulnerable as much as the players because of the heat and humidity, you better take care of yourself. And Andy needs to be able to do it. It's early in the season. Andy was 16-0 in the month of September the last 4 years going in to this season. Now he's 1-2, which is typically not what Andy's used to.
Just last one before I let you go, Michael. It's easy to, what's the best way to put it? Not to get painted the villain, but to have everything you do be open to interpretation when you say less. And even though Bill Belichick at times has been maybe too reserved with the media, arguably, in terms of just sidestepping things that warrant answers, he also hasn't dragged anybody through the mud in this situation or stepped out of line. He's tried to kind of stay in the middle of the lane in terms of Tom Brady's departure. I guess you could make the case that they both have. But, when you think about what he doesn't say, is he kind of being unfairly painted as the guy who drove Tom away when what you maintain might be true, that, this is well within Tom Brady's right to make these decisions, and he's the one that ultimately left the franchise?
I think this is the way Coach Belichick always is. He's never come to a press conference and said, this player was bad or that player was bad. He always has accountability, and it starts with himself. And I think that's a good quality. We lost as a team. We didn't coach well enough. We didn't play well enough. We need to get better at everything we do. I think he's always been that way. He's never been one to pass the blame, and he's always been one to accept the blame when things go wrong. So, I don't see this as anything different. I mean, I think he has always taken the high road, and I think he'll continue to, because with the 6 trophies in his closet, I mean, this partnership worked. It really worked well.
No doubt about it. Michael Lombardi, the GM Shuffle, the Daily Coach, a newsletter that I love and read every morning, and you should too. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks, Carolyn.